about the VOD and the silver screen. Kevin and Tom and Joe know all there is to know, from masterpieces to deep fried tacos. And if the movie sucks, you might hear them say, there's no telling where the guys will take you. Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, cause we already warned you. Better watch out, it's gonna ruin the plot. Real spoilers. Real spoilers. Real spoilers.
Broadcasting from the lush but not lavish studios located in the basement of the O'Keefe Institute for Advanced Film Snarkitude, this is Real Spoilers, episode 820, Red One. So here's where I struggle with the title of this movie, just to start. Is it Red One or Red One?
Oh, Red One. Like
I've always...
Get no...
You know, it said Red One, but I always think of the old Mark Hamill World War II film, and I keep on wanting to call it the Big Red One. So.
He's not red, you know. If he were red, I guess other than part of his outfit, dark red, but you know, he could be a red one. But no, I think it's his call sign, Red One.
Yeah, it's just... We had this debate when I was reviewing this on the radio about where to emphasize... The syllables. So we are recording remotely this week because I had to work. So this is what I'm getting paid right now. The first time.
Oh man, the first time anyone's ever been paid for this podcast. Amazing.
Yeah, how about that? And so we will go around the virtual table and introduce ourselves. We will start with our guests. We have Jim Batts from We Are Movie Geeks and Tony Mosello from Morning Blend St. Louis. Hey guys.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Joe couldn't bother to go see Red One. I guess, you know, he's just too important for this amazing cinematic masterpiece.
Yeah, we have so much hate in our hearts that we subjected two strangers to see this movie.
'Tis the season.
Well, I was going to be seeing it anyway. I'm going to take one for the team there.
I did I will say for our guests, I purposefully looked for friends who had seen it and talked about it on social media. I was not going to make someone go out of their way to see this movie.
We wanted to do nothing to pad the box office and increase the likelihood of a sequel.
Yes, only critics that have seen this for free, please.
Yeah, no
Need
one
apply.
No one needs a Red 2.
Please don't.
except for the Rock, I guess. But so before we dig into the movie itself, some shameless plugs. Don't forget we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, wherever you find a podcast. You can find us while you're there. Be sure and follow us so you never miss an episode. Maybe leave us a review. That is super helpful and greatly appreciated. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/realspoilers. While you're there, like the page, join the group. It's called the League of Show Sharers, the group that is, because we are hoping you will share an episode. People who were kind enough to share an episode last week include Michael Tonkovic, Librarian, Cynthia, Richard Krotzer, Tammy Lynn Powers, Betts, Chris Falls, Tom Dowdy, Chris Magic Man, Gabriel Lugo, Travis Tewitt, Julianne Jordan, Ralph Tribble, Brendan McGuckin, Taylor Ward, Aaron Kyleman, Heather Sachs, Edit Photo Gamer, Jazz Mom 12, Geek to Me Radio, Ken Holtzhauser, Ronnie Castle, Colby Mack, Jarpo, Mike, and Oscar, Nostalgia Cast, In Session Film, and Ryan Terry. So thank you very much for all that. Also, don't forget we have a Patreon where for only $5 a month you get all sorts of bonus content, and we like you extra. And then finally, you can watch all of these over on the YouTube. So check that out. So okay, there's all that. Let's dig in, shall we?
So I've got to admit to you guys something that I wanted to save until this
he liked it.
I didn't hate this movie, okay? I know it's getting a lot of crap for what it is, for a big, dumb holiday kind of family action adventure, modern update on the Santa Claus tale. Like, I didn't hate it. I had fun with this thing.
I think my biggest complaint...
Sorry, it's better than the trailer would make you believe.
The trailer made me think. I told Tom before we watched this movie, I go, I am not looking forward to this. I've been sick of The Rock for a long time. This movie looks like garbage. And he's like, I don't think the movie's going to change your mind. I had such low expectations going into it that when I checked out and sat back and watched, I'm like, all right, it was fun. Tom, what were you gonna say?
So I think the biggest problem I had with this movie is just is just how completely unnecessary it is. And I always hate when people say stuff that about movies because ultimately none of them are necessary.
Right.
I will grant you that. But like, I was just like, what is the purpose of any of this? And I just felt like the pacing was so slow. Like, it was an interesting concept that could have worked, but it just didn't seem like anybody really wanted to be there or was bringing their A game to the effort. And I can't help but think this. I know that this was originally intended for streaming only. It was just going to be something that went on Amazon, and I just can't help but think that Chris Evans and The Rock were kind of phoning it in because they were just like, this is going to be on Amazon for 3 weeks and then be completely forgotten to time, and there's no reason for me to really make an effort.
I will tell you who wasn't phoning it in, and that's J.K. Simmons. That guy, I got to give him credit, but with his acting chops and the way, I will tell you, I think the way that the actors took this movie semi-seriously. Usually I don't like it when a movie's like, oh, come on, they can have fun, they can crack a smile, why is it so serious? But something about it, the way that they took it so uber seriously and they used the goofy Christmas terminology and words, but like didn't crack a smile about it. They're like, no, this is what it's called here in the North Pole. Like, something about it was endearing to the fact that they created this world and they live in it and it's real and they all talk like this and they say these things, but they don't joke every time they say them. It's like they've been doing it for 500 years. Why would that be funny to them? I liked it. And J.K. Simmons is like seriously delivering monologues as Nick, as Santa Claus, where I'm just like, holy crap. I mean, he doesn't phone it in for a second. He's like seriously doing this hard-hitting delivery as Santa Claus about, kids and seeing their inner child and stuff. And so I don't know, that guy is awesome. And I think it's so funny what he got jacked for, to play Commissioner Gordon in Batman v Superman, and like has never let up, right? Like, because we saw him lifting weights for that movie. And then
I will say though, I don't know that J.K. Simmons has ever not been jacked. I think that he has roles where he's dressed in a way that you can't tell.
You think in Juno, like as the dad? I just don't remember him being like.
Go back to Oz.
Oh, yeah, Oz.
Yeah, but go back all the way to Oz. That's the '90s where he was like the biggest badass in that prison.
Yeah,
and he was ripped, and so like I kind of think maybe he's always been ripped
and kind of covered it up for some of these roles just
because
for the comedic.
Because of his appearance, he's not typically going to be playing like the lead of an action movie or the romantic lead, and so because he's more of a character actor, and so because of that, he doesn't typically get roles that require him to show off his physical stature, and so when we do see it, because we're used to him playing these other roles, it's it can be disconcerting. But like, did you ever watch the show Oz?
Yeah, I never watched the whole thing. I went back and started watching it. I've seen some of the episodes of it.
Yeah, I mean, he was like the white supremacist tough guy, head of the Aryan nation. Like, I mean,
I always
was
forget
super
he
tough.
was on that just because he's done so many roles over the years for the past, maybe 2 decades where he's been a character actor in Hollywood in these big movies, and he pops up everywhere, and I kind of forgot. So I will say, so I've given my opinions. I know I'm probably going to be the odd man out here, but Tony, let's hear from you first. I want to hear your take on this movie.
Man, I thought it was overstuffed, just totally confused. So one of my biggest worries here is, who is this for? We talked about it was going to go to streaming, but that opening scene I think is going to be kind of revealing for Santa Claus, the magic behind it for some kids. I mean, for the rest, there's language throughout. There's no F-bombs, luckily, but there's a few that are kind of, shown, not said. I just think that the target audience here is a major miss. Maybe 10 to 14-year-olds are going to find, no offense, Kevin, you enjoyed it, but I just don't know where this is going. But the other one we haven't mentioned yet for who didn't mail it in here, Kristofer Hivju. I thought he was fantastic as Krampus. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, he was all in.
It's a campy feeling, but he was 100% all in. Yeah. For those that aren't familiar, that's Tormund from Game of Thrones. He's been in a few roles as well. But yeah, besides him and JK, no one else had a pulse. Even like Lucy Liu, why was she there? Like, I just or
Yeah,
miscasting.
he's isn't Kristofer the Old Spice guy now too, or doesn't he do one of those body wash
Yeah.
commercials that's like comedic and goofy, like Terry Crews used to do and all that? No, you make a great point though. I was thinking that during this movie, this is the only other problem. Like again, even though I enjoyed it, you're right though. That opening scene, you're kind of like, but they do that in some movies too. And the thing is, you see the rest of the movie that Santa Claus is real. So I wasn't so worried. Like if it was all
Yeah,
about
I was thinking the same thing that like, they but you're in a movie where Santa Claus is a real thing.
Yeah.
So
like when he started saying it, I'm like, oh man, I hate it when kids movies do this. Or ones that kids are gonna see because you're like, oh, you don't want to just start off a movie like that and boom. But like the ones that do that usually are pretty careful about it being like, oh no, he's just doubting, he's real. Clearly we're going on an adventure with Santa Claus. But to your point, like this movie has some really dark stuff in it, and it has some humor that seems more geared towards adults, but it's not rated R and it's not Bad Santa where they're dropping F-bombs and the comedy is crude and for an adult audience. So you're right, it does live in kind of this limbo between kids movie and for adults. And while I think there is something to enjoy for everyone, you're right, it's not like a really firm target audience to where I do believe it is kind of get lost at time, so to speak. Jim,
I was forgetting this movie while I was watching it.
Okay.
It was just like a treadmill. It was like a conveyor belt where it was just like 2 scenes ago were dropping off as I was consuming the new scene.
Yeah.
Like if I went if I was at a family function 2 weeks from now and I saw this on TNT,
Yeah.
I'd be like, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Jim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on a couple of things that you mentioned. Yes, J.K. Simmons is wonderful in it. The big problem is he's gone for like about an hour in the
Right.
film.
Oh yeah,
You know,
I mean
he's
they got him.
terrific at the start, terrific at the end. But if he were in it through the whole thing, and I know that doesn't make sense with the way they've set up the plot, it would be so much better. And I think The Rock is phoning it in. I think there's a little twinkle in Chris Evans's eye because I think he likes pushing up against his good guy, Captain America image in this. And he's able to do a little bit more of his Boston accent, although it kind of veers into the Brooklyn. He do a lot of D's and do's through the whole
Yeah.
thing,
It's hard.
But he can't hold
but-
it. It
Yeah.
keeps drifting. He went to the Kevin
Yeah.
Costner school of accents. He just can't
It's funny
maintain.
you would mention Kevin Costner because in the opening sequence, which I finally figured out it was a flashback because we see an old style big tube type
Yeah.
computer monitor in
Same,
the
yeah.
background. That his I guess Jack, that's Chris Evans's character, his father is lecturing him about being
His
nice
uncle.
at Christmas, and that's Kevin Costner. That was his character on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Lieutenant Holtz's husband.
Yeah,
So-
that's
I
Mark
thought that was
Mark Evan
What's that?
Jackson. That character or that actor is Mark Evan Jackson. He's great, and we watch a lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I was excited to see him pop up. But then I'm like, oh, he's there for 5 lines, dang, because he never comes back. I mean, he could have still been around when I don't know. I just wish he was in it a little more.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's talk about the plot of this thing a little bit. So basically, these mythological creatures are real. In this world, there's this let's see. So I'm just reading off Wikipedia because I forgot the name of it, but MORA, the Mythological Oversight and Restoration Authority. So basically, they're in charge of making sure that all these mythological creatures, do what they're supposed to do. And so in this world, Santa Claus is real, Krampus is real. They're brothers, and they are distanced because of things that happen that are explained to us. But all these characters, all these mythological beings are real. Headless Horseman's there, and they poke fun at some of the other things that it really exist in this world that we know is fairy tales or fables or what have you. So anyway, the opening, Chris Evans' character is a kid, and he's saying, oh, I don't believe in Santa, and he's a bad kid, right? So he's like, he's eating Santa's cookies and milk, and he's telling the other kids that all this is BS, and he's talking to his uncle that we mentioned, and he's like, how can he do this all in one night? The typical Santa, how could he possibly do this kind of thing? Flash forward to, I don't know, what does it say, 20, 30 years later, something like that?
30
years later, okay? And so he's an adult, and he's basically they call him the Wolf. He's got a code name, and he finds people that can't be found. That's his deal. So he can track down people. He's very good with security and hacking. And so the opening scene, I thought was pretty funny toward the beginning of the movie, where he's walking around and he's doing this, Rube Goldberg machine of unfortunate things, where he's throwing a newspaper down, and
It's very Jack Sparrow.
yeah, I can see. Yeah,
It wants to be the introduction of Jack Sparrow in the first Pirates movie.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of had fun with it. And I do think Chris Evans showed up to play ball. Like, The Rock, it's hard to tell because it does seem like everything he does is phoned in. But, like, Chris Evans with this role seemed to be having fun with it.
I will agree with that. I know that I really feel like The Rock phoned it in. And I know it's hard to gauge on a film because, they're not filmed sequentially, right? So we don't always know that if we're watching a scene that was filmed the first day of production or the last day of production.
True.
But I do feel like Chris Evans showed up to do a thing, and then The Rock wasn't playing along, and then he just ended up meeting his energy, right? Like it's like it seemed very similar to like the stories that you hear about Bruce Willis. I know we're not supposed to ever say anything bad about Bruce Willis, but he was making some really shitty paycheck movies long before he had aphasia. So but it reminds me a lot of the stories that that Kevin Smith talks about making. What was the cop movie?
A Cop Out. Yeah.
Cop Out. Yeah, or even working with him on that the Die Hard movie that he was in, about how he was just like, oh, he's not really here to do a thing. He's just collecting a check.
But I will say that's weird, though, because, I mean, I would tend to agree with you, except for he's producing this movie. His $7 production company produced this. He's got a role as a producer. He's making money depending on, he wants to be there. If it's successful, he's making more money. And, this is a movie with a $250 million budget, which is just insane.
Where did it go?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, as I watched the movie, because I asked that question before the trailer and just could not fathom, other than each of the main actors making $50 million each, but which may be true in some cases, but I was wondering. But you know what, to their credit, this movie has some practical effects in it that are really good. The prosthetics, the creatures and everything, I was actually really impressed. I mean, obviously it's a CG fest with the action, and as most movies are now with a lot of stuff, but they didn't have to go so hard on the practical effects with the mythological especially in the Krampus area and everything. Those were really good, actually. I mean, that costs money.
I mentioned in my review. I mentioned in my review, I enjoyed that Krampus kind of reminded me of Tim Curry in 1985's Legend, and a little bit of Hellboy.
Yeah.
That they really the big prosthetic suit. It's mocap can work a lot of times, but it's nice to see the practical effects. That's what what I recommended about Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is all the practical effects in it.
Yeah,
nice change.
This was not a movie where if you were to tell me that this big budget $250 million Dwayne Johnson movie that would use practical effects, I'm like, that's a foregone conclusion at this point, that to expect these big action movies are going to do most of it practical, and they didn't have to, right? Like, I mean, you could have showed up, and if all the Krampus monsters were all CG or whatever, like, you'd expect that. You're just like you expect CG reindeer, right? And which I didn't think were too bad either, but you're just expecting at this point. So that was impressive to me. The other thing I liked about this movie is when we get there is that when they go to the North Pole, I kind of like how they made it their own thing. Like, they modernized it, that it's not just candy canes and fa la 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 and joyful and sprinkles everywhere, right? Like, it had this modern feel to it. And although the outfits of the security, the ELF, the Enforcement Logistics and Fortification Group, I mean, it reminded me a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like, did they just borrow the Guardians outfits and put a different patch on them? But like, the fact that they are darker and it's a little bit more serious and sophisticated. Again, we've seen so much of we've seen the Santa Claus movies. We've seen these other joyful, silly, fa-la-la, elves and their green pointy hats and all that. And so I like how they had a modern take. I like the technology. I like how the sleigh worked. I like how the presence, the shrinking and the growing of the people to get in and out of places, just shaking like out of a salt shaker presents into stockings, and then Santa Claus enlarges them, like using kind of like Ant-Man tech, it seemed like. But I thought that was fun. Like, I've never seen that in a Santa Claus movie, and for this to deliver things that were fresh and, a different take on it instead of regurgitating the classic Santa Claus stuff, I enjoyed those parts.
I think the thing I liked the best, that I thought was the most clever, was that the toy stores were portals.
Yeah, that too, right?
Of how they travel.
Lore. Yeah, I mean,
I like that.
That's stuff that we've never seen before, right? So like this movie, and this is Jake Kasdan. I mean, Jake Kasdan is a good writer and director, like, and this is a guy that he did Jumanji, which was a huge hit for The Rock, and he's made some good stuff and some fun movies, and we like the Jumanji. At least that first one was really fun, and the second one was okay. It wasn't great, but
the second one. The first one.
Yeah,
the
second
first one.
The first of the reboot. Welcome to the Jungle. Yeah, of course. The second in the whole thing. But anyway, I mean, you got a good director behind it. A decent cast of characters. But to blow through the plot here real quick though. So you've got Chris Evans' character who is disheartened, obviously, with Christmas. He's a bad guy. He's doing this thing. He's tracking people. He doesn't care who hires him as long as the check clears or the wire comes in. And so come to find out that basically when we get to the North Pole and we see Cal, who is the Rock's character, and Santa Claus talking, Cal's like, I've just lost the joy in it. I don't see any of the magic. People are bad. The naughty list is longer than ever. It's the first time ever that the naughty list is longer than the nice list. And he's like, I'm just done. It's been 300 years or whatever. And he's like, I'm retiring. This is going to be my last year. You need to find someone who can share the joy with you. And like, you're so amazing. And I'm just bringing you down. So it's like one last ride. Well, come to find out, there's like this secret task force that we see that's infiltrated the North Pole. They end up kidnapping Santa Claus, and what I thought was, again, it's a CG fest, but it was kind of a fun chase scene. Had some kind of that. It was like reminiscent of the Ant-Man stuff, where Cal has this wrist guard, which is another obviously fresh thing for a Santa Claus lore, but he can shrink objects, and he says they actually changed their reality, so it's not just shrinking and growing, but the fun part, like with the toy store stuff, is later on they grab a bunch of toys, and he not only can enlarge the toys to life size, but it brings them to life, and they do different things. So this chase scene involves like snowmobiles that are enlarging and shrinking, and he's going down slides that are like meant to deliver the gifts and things around the North Pole. So kind of a fun scene, but Santa Claus is kidnapped, and so he ends up having to get him back. He talks to Lucy Liu, who's the head of this Mora organization, and she says, we've got to find the person that was responsible for this. Come to find out, it was Chris Evans. That scene in the beginning where he's causing the fire and distracting people, and he sneaks into this secure building and puts like a tap with a data device and downloads some stuff. That was to get the coordinates in the North Pole. So he didn't know what he was doing, but he was hired to do this job. He got the bad guys this info, and just to spoil it right now, I mean, this is a character or a mythological being I've never heard of. I'm guessing maybe she's real. I don't know if you guys looked up, but Gryla, the Christmas witch. Is anyone familiar with this character?
Is she clickable on the Wikipedia entry?
She's not. Not this one. Maybe she is on one of the earlier ones. The one I'm at, it's not. Hold on, with a little accent over it. In Icelandic folklore, Gryla is a monstrous entity who lives in the wilderness of Iceland. Let's see here. She appears on a list for Haiti for troll women of something in Gryla in Christmas folklore. Here we go. Gryla is closely associated with Christmas folklore and younger traditions. The oldest extant source connecting Gryla with Christmas is a poem that was likely co-composed by Reverend Gunnar Eraldson of Fell and Sletlow. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Go on.
He's good.
Yeah. It doesn't give any back. Hold on. At the end of the paragraph, in which Gryla's lazy husband and unpleasant husband
that's a hurtful stereotype.
makes his appearance and claims that Gryla was left bedridden after his journey to Slethula. So there's no description of what actually she does, but
That's all it is.
The whole paragraph was like, this guy wrote it and this guy, and then her husband was lazy. Okay, so anyway, apparently, but I guess my point is, even though I had never heard of her, the way that they mention Krampus and the way they say, here's the headless horseman and all these mythological creatures and sort, I figured she was real. And I like that they basically took these mythological tales and traditions, and instead of just making up they're just like the classics, like, oh, here's Frosty and here's Jack Frost. Like Jack Frost isn't in this movie, but like they're like, oh, here's Krampus and here's Gryla, this Christmas witch. And I felt like Jake Kasdan. He directed it. I'm not sure if he wrote it, actually, now that I mentioned this. Let me look real quick.
Yeah, I think he just directed it.
Did
yeah.
he just direct this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Just looking. Okay. Chris Morgan and Hiram Garcia. Okay. So, but anyway, but the writers, though, you can tell that at least they pulled from the mythology. And so I kind of like that for the world building, because we have these tales that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. And even before Santa Claus and, you know, all these traditions and things that have been passed down. And I liked that it felt kind of like a real lived in world, even though they are mythological, but it was a more grounded take, and you just get some more of that backstory. So I did appreciate that. But anyway, they find out it's Chris Evans. So, you know, there's a scene where they go and kidnap him, and they bring him back, and they basically say, you have to rescue Santa Claus. And it's, you know, it's kind of like a road movie, and it's like The Rock is the straight man, Chris Evans is a little more comedic, and he's the fish out of water. So everything The Rock says with the, oh, this is what we do. And I like how basically, you know, The Rock would say something ridiculous, and they'd go to Chris Evans, and he would be like, really? Like, we have to save Santa Claus? And I liked it. You know, again, it's not like it's the best movie in the world, but I did find it funny to see his reactions to all these things in this world that seemed so ridiculous.
I thought the pacing on this movie was really weird. Like, it was just so slow.
It was
and
a
I
little
felt
long.
like there were like it was slow, like within a scene where they were even saying things that were interesting. I just felt like there were weird pauses. It was just like especially when they're supposed to be bantering.
Right.
It was like they were bantering at half speed. It was almost like they were doing a dry run through on the banter just to familiarize themselves with the lines, and then when it was time to do it, you were supposed to like, okay, but now bring the energy, and then they just never did.
Yeah.
And we were seeing these like half speed takes.
Yeah, I can see that a little bit. There was a scene I remember with The Rock, and when he and Chris Evans are like, when The Rock's like, let's save Christmas, and Chris Evans doesn't say anything. He's like, you're going to say it. What? So let's say, let's save Christmas. Let's save Christmas. Nope. Say it with more energy. Like, I feel like they were doing some kind of improvisation there or something, and it was supposed to cut, and like they kept going, and then they just left it in, you know, like.
I also feel like it's funny you mentioned the like, you know, the we're going to save Christmas, because that's a prime example of a thing that I thought like on paper was funny, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of trying to coax Chris Evans into saying that like this catchphrase of like, you know, an overly melodramatic moment of like, we're gonna save Christmas, and he won't do it.
Yeah,
like I thought that was funny, and I also felt like it was supposed to be a running gag that got cut, because they say it there, and then it comes up again at the end. But you never. But like,
I think it was just a callback, because he's like,
but like
it was
that's
ridiculous.
the sort of thing that's supposed to be a running gag throughout the movie, that he can't get him to say it, and then at the end he finally says it as they're actually saving Christmas. Like then it's a moment where you're going to cheer for it, and instead it was like, oh yeah, they did that thing 40 minutes ago, and they did the same thing with the Wonder Woman action figure that he's going to use the gun on. Like I really thought,
but they
that,
worked
like,
into the plot. Like, see, that's the thing that with a worse written movie, that's the thing that we get frustrated with, that they have these throwaway things and it's just kind of crappy or whatever. But in this movie, so they go through the toy stores. The Rock grabs a bunch of toys, with like a car, obviously, so they can get away, and board games and a Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And Chris Evans, he's like, get a practical car. Of course, he grabs a Corvette. This movie's sponsored by Chevrolet. I don't know if you guys know that. There were a couple hints throughout the movie, but he grabs a Corvette, which is, you know, obviously not conspicuous, but he's like, why would I grab a Hot Wheels? That's not cool. But on the way out of the toy store, he's like, do you have a Wonder Woman action figure? Like, that's a funny line, because The Rock's bringing stuff to life, and he's like, oh, why not? And so later on, come to find out, the Christmas witch is working with shapeshifters, and that's how they're able to infiltrate the North Pole. Spoiler alert, but for way later in the movie, we find out that not only is Santa gone, but they've also infiltrated and started taking over people. The shapeshifters are acting like Mrs. Claus and the other workers and the elf force and all that stuff. And so the way that when The Rock finally shows up to find out that Chris Evans is really Chris Evans, is that he's like, what's your favorite action figure? And he says Wonder Woman. So like, I know that it's not like a running gag type of thing, but like, again, they worked it into the plot in a way where he's like, oh, well, of course, that's what he would say. And it was a funny moment earlier. So I do feel like the writing in this still with the mythological creatures and everything, and then some of those callbacks. I mean, it was clever enough to work to where it was at least entertaining. You know, it wasn't the best movie ever, but you know, we've seen some really bad movies, and I wouldn't put this on a list of just like, I wouldn't say this as terrible writing. You know what I mean?
I don't even think it's near the worst of the year. I mean, we've seen some really bad films this year. I think a good, analogy for this is it was never going to be Christmas dinner. This is not what type of movie it is. It's dessert. The ingredients were there for something, but it just never came together in the baking process. There was the acting we've talked about, the pacing, there's just the visual effects we talked about earlier with the chase. I thought the early chase scene with the kidnapping, I thought the CGI for that was laughably bad, and I feel bad for the artists. They may have just run out of money at that point, but it was honestly some of the worst CGI I had seen this year during that chase sequence.
Yeah, I mean, the clear green screen with The Rock when he's on a vehicle that looked like, I mean, Robert Rodriguez in his bathroom can make better green screen action scenes than that. I totally get what you mean. I think at this point, I mean, I've been so disenfranchised with CG. Like, I'm a huge proponent of practical effects. I hate crappy CG, but like, it's not going anywhere. I think I've just gotten used to it, to the fact where like when we see CG like that, I'm not saying we should settle, and obviously we should strive for better, and there is better CG out there. And people like, Gareth Edwards with Rogue One, or with whatever that last one was, the creator, thank you, with amazing, incredible CG that looks so realistic on micro budgets for big movies like that. I mean, the creator had maybe an $80 million budget or 60, like we were so impressed by it, and this had a 250, and the creator was dealing with robots and like intricate parts and stuff and spaceships, and so yes, not saying that we should settle or anything, but I've kind of just come accustomed to like, man, CG sucks. I hate it. It's always going to be in movies. And so like, I just watched it for the blocking, like I'm just like watching like, okay, it was kind of a fun action sequence, but you're right, Tony. I mean, 100%, this should not win the awards for visual effects because The Rock sat on a bench in front of a green screen and he went like this, vroom vroom. Like, it looked so cheesy and so bad in that scene, but I like the idea of it, so I wish it could have had better execution, but I think that's the thing, low expectations. If you're going into this movie and you want to see a fun action movie that has some decent banter, and J.K. Simmons and Chris Evans are at least showing up to play ball, I think it's fun. Like the Christmas Witch, I will say probably my biggest letdown is that character, not only because I didn't know about her as a mythological character, but she just didn't look very cool or anything. Like she didn't seem that intimidating, like until the end when she becomes an actual monster. She's just seems like a normal person with like, they made her eyes super blue or something. You know what I mean? Like, she wasn't intimidating. She wasn't scary. Her line delivery wasn't bad. Nick Kroll was more intimidating delivering her lines than she was.
Oh, he was
I will say they clearly did not talk to one another, did not get direction for how the other person would act. That was probably my least favorite part in the movie, and I love Nick Kroll. But what happens is the witch is, so basically the guy that brokered the deal between Chris Evans and the witch is like some mafioso guy played by Nick Kroll, and he's fine doing his smarmy, mafia thing, whatever, like before he gets possessed, but then she possesses him when they say her name. I guess that's how she's triggered, and so she's able to like take possession of his body, and she's going like this. She's going like, "Oh, Cal, so we meet again. I am going to take you guys out." And then Nick Kroll is going, "Cal, I am going to take you out." Like, they cut back and forth between the characters, and she's going, "I'm going to take you out," and then he's going insane, and it's like, how did the director, I mean, like, this is where Jake Kasdan should have been like, okay, unless he wasn't there, and like, I don't know, Kasdan should have been like, okay, unless he wasn't the normal, but the other person's crazy, like, it was bad, right? Like,
I felt really bad for Kiernan Shipka. So I just saw her last week in The Last Showgirl, which she gets a great supporting turn. And I was like, this might be her moment. She probably thought it was going to be as well. And again, there was just no direction for her. I think she didn't know which way to go.
Yeah.
And then with that scene with Nick Kroll as well, I'm sure she has to be questioning now, like, why didn't I talk like that? Or why did he talk like that?
It's the biggest question mark I have for the movie. It just doesn't make sense in like movie language. And I mean, someone should have caught that. Someone should have said, either you do it different or you do it different. But how do you have two actors that are playing the same person in that moment and cutting back and forth, give different deliveries? Like, I don't know.
But I just thought she was kind of, I was watching Sally Draper being a bad girl on Halloween or something, or even worse
Yeah.
girl. But Tony, when you mentioned it was dessert, is this like a nice cream pie, or is it more like a fruit cake?
This-
Well,
That
well,
everyone's gonna pass around and get rid of.
it was
I
supposed to be a
I mean,
nice pie. That's not what the final result was, though.
this is the apple pie
yeah.
after Jason Biggs got to it.
I like that.
Good intentions. It was good. It was good on paper, right? Like when it was put in the oven, and then you got to it, after seconds.
Well, you mentioned about the toys
Yeah.
that he picks up. I'm sitting there through the whole thing going, when are you going to do something with a Monopoly board?
That was
Yeah,
clearly
exactly.
just
Like when he picks up the Monopoly board, I'm like, okay, that's smart. They're like, this is where we're gonna get money from,
Right.
and then they never address
I know,
it.
and
Surely that was cutting room floor material. Surely.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of things filmed for this movie that didn't happen, and that's why I think that there are running gags that got cut, and so we just see them once or twice. There are all that stack of toys that he grabs was clearly thought out, and then they just didn't have time for it because they were like, we got to keep this thing under 2 hours.
we
And
got to keep
I
this
am
thing under
grateful they did.
$250 million, Tom. I mean, we only
Yeah.
have $250 million, and maybe they did go and film it in the bathroom with a green screen. Like some of those chase sequences. Maybe they just ran out of money.
I think it was it was just a money laundering thing, and then they were like, "Oh, we actually have to make a movie."
Yeah. Kevin, when you mentioned there are the worst things, and all that, I'm just thinking, but if this was only on streaming on Amazon, you would feel like, well, that was a nice time killer, but to make the effort to go to a theater to see this, I just don't,
Yeah.
think that people will really believe it's worth getting out of their homes for.
I can see that.
I agree, but here's the other scary thing. It's got an A- cinema score.
That's what I'm saying though.
How is that possible?
I didn't think it was that bad. Now an A- is like a C+ in cinema score language, but because A+ is everyone loved it. But that's the thing. I think low expectations. I think it just looked like, let's go see this silly Christmas movie. Oh, you like The Rock? Okay. Oh, you like Captain America? Okay. But when the credits rolled, I had a fun time. And I know part of that is my very, very low expectations. But again, I think they put some effort into this movie with the writing, the practical effects, some of the actors in the movie giving it their all. Again, I think, The Rock, it's a tough one because, again, I've become disenfranchised with him and his franchises. And I'm really not caring for The Rock lately. But, I mean, his character is I'm one day away from retirement. I'm jaded. I'm sick of my job kind of thing. And so, for what it is, there wasn't much energy for that character to give. And so maybe that gives him a little bit of an out. But even though it seems like he was kind of phoning it in, I don't know how you play that character and be wacky or like Deadpool or something when you're just I don't see the joy in Christmas. I don't see the inner child in these kids. He's kind of dead inside. And so while his performance wasn't the most charismatic or fun thing like The Rock used to do, it's this character is kind of it kind of fits the character. So I give him a little bit of a pass on this one.
I'm excited to see what A24 does with him with the Smash Machine.
Yeah,
that's what I got my hopes set on.
That could be his Sandler role, right? When Sandler did Punch Drunk Love, and it was whoa, okay, hold on, and then they give him Uncut Gems, and it's okay, crap, this guy's awesome in serious roles. We know The Rock can do it. We've seen him in some other roles where he's really good. Be Cool was the first one when I was okay, wow, he can do something. This guy actually, is doing some pretty good acting, and he's had roles where he gets to stretch a bit, and so I hope after that. I said that on the podcast, Tom, not too long ago. I was that's what The Rock needs to do to reboot his image. Instead of every movie, Rampage, Jungle Cruise, the Jumanji movies, where he's wearing the same khaki shirt and he does the same thing in a jungle over and over again. And even Skyscraper and all these generic action movies, The Rock needs to do movies like A24. He needs to take these meaty roles to prove he can act. And I would love to see him in more roles like that. And, he's also getting older, not to say that he's too old or anything, but I think there comes a point in time where you can transition from doing the smart ass charismatic, even Ryan Reynolds type roles. At some point, give The Rock something meaty to chew on and play more of a serious, character, not just a goofy not goofy, but that's that smirky, charismatic, I'm a hot shot, whatever. Like, come on, just be a normal dude, I'm trying. Oh, so the crux of this movie comes down to, so basically, obviously those two of them are on this journey to save Christmas. I thought the Snowman fight was pretty cool. I thought there was some good things there. So they track down the Nick Kroll character. There's that awful thing that happens, whatever. But she ends up sending this creepy ice cream man truck that came out of the water. Like, it reminded me of something like Sweet Tooth from the Twisted Metal games, but the way that it came out of the water, this ice cream truck like slowly drives out. Everyone on the beach is looking and like, what the hell is that? And it's just creepy and dilapidated. And then out of the back of it come these three snowmen, but they're like these huge buff snowmen. And they have these ice swords and ice whatever, weapons and everything. And I thought there was a pretty fun thing there. They basically, anything they touch can turn to ice. And so they're turning people to ice, and they're trying to get to Nick Kroll so he can't talk and give anything away. The two of them are running away and chasing him. I thought that was decent, and I didn't think the CG was too bad there. And they had some more mythology, which I thought was kind of fun. Like, I guess Frosty usually comes to life with, he's got his pipe and he's got his nose, and I guess maybe the hat sometimes is used to bring him to life. And this one, it's the nose. So they build upon that mythology that, like, you take away the nose, that's how you defeat them.
I don't know that the CGI looked better here. It's just, it's not trying to replicate anything real.
Yeah.
And so your eye will forgive, I think, a cheaper look, because you're just like, well, I mean, it's a real life snowman. What's that supposed to look
but
like?
to their credit, though, I mean, I do think you could have some really bad CG. Like, we've seen terrible CG in movies, right? And the other thing you got to give them credit for, this action scene was filmed on a beach in the daytime, right? So bad CG, they always hide at nighttime, and I think that's exactly what they did with the last fight sequence, of course. But these were snowmen fighting on a beach in the sun, right? So, like, you can't hide it in the dark or anything, so I thought it was pretty good for what it was. The other thing was, again, I think my favorite set piece was when they go to find Krampus, because they find out that, like, okay, yeah, Krampus and Santa had this disagreement, basically, in this mythology. Again, I love the world building of this, but basically they're brothers and they work together. Santa would, deliver the presents, but Krampus came up with this list because he wanted to make the world a better place. And in mythology and with that character, like in the real stories and lore of him, is like, well, he punishes the bad kids. And so he creates the naughty list. Santa only had the good list and just wanted to help everyone and see the good in them. He ended up punishing the kids. Santa was not cool with that. So they cut ties and they kind of banished Krampus to his Count Dracula castle at his dark and creepy place. And so they do travel there to get Krampus, because they're like, oh, well, he's the only one. Well, first they think Santa's being kept there because Krampus and the witch had a thing at some point. So, like, let's go find him, see if Santa's there. And then they go in, like, the interior I thought looked really cool with, like, the big dining hall. It did look like something out of Dracula or Game of Thrones or whatever. You've got all these people celebrating Krampus Nacht or whatever the celebration is. And then they're playing this game called Krampus Slap, which is like slap fight, but they see Krampus slaps this guy across the room, which comes back later. So I thought the characters looked good, the castle looked good, the performance was really good. I mean, he was firing out, he was chewing the scenery, but it worked for the character, and did have fun with it. But at this point in time, basically, Chris Evans, being the thief and the bad guy he is, and he has debts to pay and stuff, he steals a gold coin from a treasure chest that's just sitting out there. And because they do that, they're imprisoned by Krampus and his guards and everything. And Krampus is like, he knows Cal from working at the North Pole, and he's like, you're going to stay here forever. That's your punishment. And then, Chris Evans, you can go tell everybody not to mess with us, not to steal from us, whatever. And Chris Evans, seeing the Krampus slap game or whatever, he's like, okay, I've got to, you're a betting man, I'm a betting man, we've got that in common at least. How about you play Krampus slap, and if he wins, we go free. If you win, then you can take both of us forever. And so, of course, that seems like a ridiculous bet. They go for it. Rock slaps Krampus, nothing. Krampus is getting ready to slap him or whatever. He hits him across the face and really knocks him hard, but he's still alive. And then right when the Rock is like gonna get ready to slap him again, Chris Evans throws his little wrist device that he like did the thief thing. He snuck it, pickpocketed it off of another guy, gives him the wrist device. He slaps Krampus across the room. They make their escape for it. And that's when, like, in a plot wise for the characters, that's when the Rock's character starts to believe a little bit, and usually it's like the person that doesn't believe in Santa. And so I thought it was kind of an interesting twist, because although Chris Evans' character doesn't is being thrown into this world and he doesn't really believe in any of it. We're more focused on Cal's change, Cal trying to see the good in people, and Saint Nick, the Santa Claus character, says that like even when they're grown up, I still see the inner child and people can be good. And so by Chris Evans saving him, he starts to see that, oh, people can change and there is good in them. And so you start to see that change. Meanwhile, Chris Evans has this son that he's distant with. He is like a one night stand, and he was never with the mother, he says, but like he has this kid and doesn't hardly ever see him, and he's this deadbeat dad, and so like he doesn't go to his Christmas recital, and the mom's calling him and is like, why don't you be a part of his life, blah blah blah. And of course she's saying that when he's like at the North Pole or at Germany or whatever, and so he's like, I can't, I'm not home right now. So anyway, the witch ends up getting to him, and her master plan for this whole movie is, again, probably this real mythological thing, but there's this snow globe that will imprison people inside of it. So she's going to take this mythological snow globe, and there's a machine, come to find out, spoilers, but I'll just give it away here, they are at the North Pole, and the reason why they wanted to break in, part of it, kidnap Santa, but also to steal their machines where they replicate toys. So they end up taking this device and tweaking it so that they can replicate the snow globes. And, there's only supposed to be one of these, but she's mass producing them, and she's going to send them to everyone on the naughty list. So not only are they going to get Kroll or whatever, like Krampus would do, or play tricks on them, she wants to imprison everybody. And it's not only people that, like, let's say did something really bad, but she says at some point, like, anyone who's ever, like, I don't know, not held the door for someone or not said sorry.
Yeah, she set the bar so high that no one will be on the good
right.
list. Yeah.
So basically she's going to take over the world, and everybody is going to be imprisoned in these snow globes. So she ends up, to get to them, she ends up sending a snow globe to what's the Chris Evans character's name? I can't even remember that part.
Jack O'Malley.
Jack O'Malley. Okay, yeah, the most generic name ever. So she sends one to Jack, but not only that, but she sends him one to his son. You think that it's like, oh, she's going to trap Jack somehow and trick him into it, but really what happens is the son calls him from the recital and is like, if you weren't going to show up, you didn't need to send me a stupid gift. Like, what's the deal with that? You don't need to. And he's like, well, I didn't send you anything. And the son shows it on his phone, and she sent him a snow globe as well, which, again, that's a bit of a plot device. Like, why even send one to Jack? I think that's kind of dumb, but it's so that he can get to the son. So the kid ends up opening it. It traps him in a snow globe, and he disappears into this realm, or really goes to the North Pole, and he's trapped in a snow globe. And Jack, again, with his change of heart, is like, that's my son. And so, and the Rock's like, no, don't do it. But he takes the snow globe, activates it. And so now Jack and his son are trapped inside of these snow globes. They're the first two people that are I don't ever see the other guy, right? Like, they test it on someone at the beginning of the naughty list, but when they go to the workshop, I only see there two. So I don't know if what happened to that.
Well, he was an experiment.
Yeah,
I
don't know if
something. And he said it didn't work right, and Grilla threatens her minions that she's going to experiment on them.
Okay, that's what it was.
He
he was captured, but they were like, it didn't return. Okay, right. So that one didn't work right, but theirs worked. And when Gryla and the shapeshifters see them at the North Pole in this workshop, they're like, oh, it worked. Okay, mass produce them, and so they pump out billions of these things, and yes, it's ridiculous, but also this is Santa Claus technology and magic. They mass produce toys and deliver them all in one night to billions of people. So in the realm of things, I mean, it's silly, but it kind of works out. But now it's like it's a race to get them and stop them from delivering all these snow globes and everything. The Rock gets back, Lucy Liu gets back. They find out the North Pole's been infiltrated again. Like, we spoiled it, but it was like shocker. Like, where is Santa? We can't find him. Wait, the trace is coming from within the North Pole. Oh my God, they're using the workshop. Like, they figure it out. Cal is able to infiltrate. All the of his elf force have been taken over by shapeshifters. There's a fight sequence. He takes them out or whatever, gets the good guys back, and they have to stop her. So it comes down to a big. This is the problem, is it comes down to the big, like, it could be a beam in the sky. This could be Enchantress and Suicide Squad. I mean, it's the same generic old fight sequence in the dark with a beam of light and powers and whatever. But they face off, and the Rock and Saint Nick, like, they've freed Santa Claus. He's on the back of the sleigh that she's going to use all the snow globe to deliver all the snow globes. And he breaks free, and he uses his powers and activates the reindeer, and they come and kick her ass, and the Rock is shrinking and doing this and that and the other. And they defeat her, and
She turns into Ursula.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
You forgot about the person that comes in to save the day.
who? Oh, yeah, your favorite, your buddy Krampus comes and has a change of heart. So even though they escape from Krampus, we see his. It's basically like a.
It's Han and the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, it's like the Millennium Falcon. I was thinking it's like it's he's got like this badass like skull cruiser motorcycle type thing, but he shows up and
it's Lobo.
It's just like Lobo. Exactly. It's Lobo.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I was thinking Jason Momoa. You're right. It's just like what that would be. But he shows up and starts blasting her, and they have this relationship, and he's saying some goofy throwaway lines or whatever, and she slaps him across the bridge or whatnot. But anyway, what happens is they end up fighting her, and she ends up crash landing in the bed of all these billions of snow globes. And
I like that.
Yeah, and that was enough
that they use her snow globes to
yeah,
capture
and it was enough snow globes, like even though she's powerful, it was able to contain her. All the powers kind of combined, and then she was in there. It was funny because I turned to Katie and I was like, unlimited cosmic power and itty bitty living space. Because it's like exactly what it reminded me of was Jafar when he was huge and fighting them and they trap him in the lamp. It was like kind of the exact same thing. But anyway, so she's trapped and contained and everybody saves the day and Cal has a change of heart and they're like, okay, we're 5 minutes behind schedule. We got to get out here and deliver these presents. And this is the part I really liked. And I'm glad they ended it, at least for me, on a high note. I thought it was really fun seeing J.K. Simmons and how he did all this stuff. And he's obviously in super good shape. So it's not like he's a big, fat Santa with the, laughing like a bowl full of jelly kind of thing. Like he's obviously ripped. So when he's doing flips and stuff, like, yes, it's silly, but also he's a super fit Santa that they said he burns 4 million calories in a night. So he's doing flips. He's doing like Ant-Man. He's shrinking, going into the chimney, enlarging, and then, like I said, sprinkling presents into stockings, and then zaps them all, and they all enlarge, and the presents, and they had that again. The callback jokes I thought were pretty decent, and this kid on his lap when he in the beginning of the movie is like, I want Death Vampires 4 for the Switch, and he's like, oh, it's a hot seller. It sounds ridiculous. And then one of the throwaway scenes cuts to a kid sleeping, and he puts the Death Vampires 4 next to him in a Switch case. Like it was just a funny callback from an hour and a half earlier that I didn't even think about again.
One of my favorite parts from that sequence, and I can't take credit for it because Max Foisey picked it out afterwards, told me, but when you see like Santa breaks the light bulb or something like that, and elves rappel down from the sleigh and fix it. Now apparently that's been seen before in an animated film. I didn't know about it, but I thought it was a really cool touch.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I had never seen that either, so yeah, maybe it does exist somewhere. But like, that's what I'm talking about with the lore building and the mythology. I felt like this movie did enough with Santa shrinking and growing and doing all that stuff. I've never ever in a movie, because movies always ask the question, how do they come down a chimney, right? Like, how do they fit there? Just, and in some movies, the chimney enlarges. In some movies, whatever. I don't know. He does whatever and gets to, like, they show you all these different methods, but I've never seen Santa be Ant-Man and shrink and grow like that. And I've never seen the presents change sizes. And like, and the way that they, I thought it was really fun. Again, this whole sequence, the way that basically the elves have all the presents prepared in these pods, and think of it like a spaceship in a docking station or shooting supplies to a space station or whatever. They've got all these pods ready, and the way that they can deliver so many presents, because again, the question is like, how do you deliver presents to billions of households around the world? So they've got these pods filled with the mini presents, and so they're all compact. And then as soon as one pod empties, they dock the old one and they shoot the new one to the sleigh. He gets refilled in the sack, and like, it's so seamless that like, Santa delivers the presents, in, out, goes back to the sleigh, grabs the sack, the elves are loading it up, and then again he jumps on the roof and he steps on the light, and then the elves zoom in and they see that, and they're changing, and they've got a whole kit. I love that an elf like lands down on the roof and he opens a briefcase and has every kind of different light bulb you could imagine, because they don't want to break someone's property, and he changes it real quick, and the elf in the sleigh is like, good job. And that's fun to me.
It's funny. You see it as they don't want to break someone's property, and I see it as they don't want to leave proof that they were there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, no, that's also.
I mean, it does both.
But if a light bulb broke, you would never say, "Oh, that was because." Like, I think realistically they could get away with it, and I thought of it as like, it's Santa. He's not gonna. But you're right. It's both for sure. But that was really fun. I think the movie really ended on a high note. That whole sequence was really enjoyable to me, and you got the extra lore of like, oh, that's how Santa does it, and why he's so quick, and why he burns so many calories. And they do invite Jack O'Malley and his son onto the sleigh to deliver presents. And, you know, they've obviously got this bond together. So, like, they've repaired their relationship. Chris Evans in his selfless act of going back for the rock and sacrificing himself and trying to save the day, like, he's become a better person. Cal finally sees, like, the little kid from the beginning that Jack, you know, when he was a kid, he finally sees the little kid sitting there, and Santa turns to him and he's like, you see it, don't you? And, you know, so he's not jaded anymore, and he's back on board after this adventure. So, you know, it's kind of hokey, kind of your typical ending or whatever, but I don't know. I had fun with it.
I just say thank God that the guy who accidentally helped kidnap Santa, who could then help find him, was Jack O'Malley and not Jack Greenberg.
Who's Jack Greenberg?
Someone who would be Jewish and not care about Christmas at all.
Oh. But yeah, but you know, going back to your point from earlier about like, what's the point of this or whatever, like, again, I do think we see so many movies, all of us as movie critics, we review a lot of movies. And to Tony's point, we've had some really bad ones this year. I've heard other people talk about it online too. And I don't know if it's just coincidental. I don't know if it's because of COVID, like, you know, everything getting delayed and now we're seeing the repercussions of that, or just whatever it is. But this year has been really rough for movies. There hasn't been a ton of stuff that I've just absolutely loved this year. But, you know,
it's weird. I feel like the best movies so far this year have been
all
horror movies.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not a horror guy at all, but like if you ask me to think of my favorite movies of the year right now, they're
The
all
Substance
horror
and Heretic,
Smile
and
2,
Smile
I
2.
thought was
Yeah,
great.
I agree with you. There's been horror.
Did you guys talk about Strange Darling? That's
No,
very
I
good
want to
also.
see that though. I would like.
No, I've not seen that yet.
But the point is, like, movies have been kind of a letdown this year. There's just something weird, and I think that we're so critical and we see so many movies. But at the end of the day, to your point, like, well, what's the point of it? Like, these are stories, you know. Before movies and before radio, I mean, people used to read books, and it doesn't have to be life changing, but it's a story. It's to entertain you and to have a fun time. And I checked back, and again, low expectations, but I was like, let's see a fun holiday movie. Hopefully it'll be fun. Is it the best movie ever? No, you know, whatever. Is it going to be an instant Christmas classic? Probably not. But like, for the time that I sat back and watched it, I was reasonably entertained. And I think it's just another story that, you know, could entertain.
You know, I was frustrated by a lot of it, though. I mean, you know, you mentioned about Lucy Liu having very little to do. I think I mentioned she's doing a variation of what is it? Ned calls in the Spider-Man movies, the guy at the desk. You know,
I don't know what the point is. I called very early in the movie when she came in. I'm like, oh, she's a bad guy, because I don't know why you cast Lucy Liu to do nothing unless it's like, oh, that character's going to have a meteor role.
Important.
Yeah,
later.
and so the fact that I don't mind that it was a little bit of a red herring, or like that you thought, oh, she might be in on it and she wasn't. Like, that's fine. But you're right. She really didn't do anything. She did.
Well, until the very end, she does join in the big fight at the end, and you get to see a little bit of that Charlie's Angels type action that she can do. Kill Bill
at least
action.
They did give her a little bit, because you're right. Like, you remember she's like can do some martial arts stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. That's Lucy Liu. Like, I remember when she did that stuff. But other than that, you're right. She is pretty wasted in the movie.
As is Bonnie Hunt, I would say.
Yeah.
Bonnie Hunt is one of the great comic actresses, and basically she's playing,
got 4 lines.
Mrs. Claus as a standard, like, oh, you know, Chris, you got to get going, got to do this, you got to do that, and kind of worried and all that. And I was, wanting her to cut loose a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to wait for Red 2. She's
oh dear
Mrs.
God,
Claus
please.
is Red 2.
No, you're right. I do think with her, like, she's not bad casting for the role, but they don't give her anything to do, and you wish that she would be a little funnier or a little bit more like snarky or something. You know, they just gave her the generic role, and that was a waste too.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to Red 2. This is going to raise our Amazon Prime prices enough.
Oh my gosh! Every streaming service is going to be $50 a month before you know it.
I know. Well, anyway,
I want to address something we kind of passed over in the Aruba section. You wondered about who this is made for. They've got a couple, and I hate to sound like a prude, a couple really gratuitous bikini shots.
They do,
where the model actresses are just falling out of the bottoms of their bikini. I'm like, what is that necessary?
Didn't someone say this was for like 12 to 14-year-old boys? Tony said, I'm sure they didn't mind it.
But I can imagine the parents kind of being a little queasy about that if they happen to bring the under 10 set to
That's
them,
Yeah.
And this is not
Yeah.
going to make any money because look, we're coming out this weekend. Okay, we're seeing Wicked later today, so that's going to take over, and you got Gladiator on top of that, and then turn the corner, then Moana 2's out. So I just don't see enough of a window here where this is going to make any kind of financial impact.
It'll be interesting. I think this could change the trajectory of The Rock's career. If so, I mean, like he already came back to Fast and Furious after saying he wouldn't because his movies were tanking and his star power was fading. If this doesn't do well, which he produced, so he put money into it, he's the star, then I think he's going to have to, and I think he should already. I don't care about the money part of it, right? Like I'm not getting the money. He should go to the A24 route. He should go and stick with some of these art house movies or independent films, or just, play some of these meaty roles that will give him a chance to actually show his acting ability and go that direction. In the long term, I think it's going to be a lot better for his career. And if this tanks and doesn't make any money, I think he's going to have to, because, I mean, it's just not working. What we've seen recently from him is not working.
I don't know if this reflects on his box office draw as much as it would under normal circumstances, because everyone in the industry knows it wasn't intended to be released theatrically. And so
that's just wild to me. Did they really make that like, I didn't know if you meant like pre-production wise or if it was actually produced and then they decided to change the distribution. Was this actually filmed and made intending?
I don't know at what point
Okay.
the decision was made. I just know from what I've read, they said that this was originally intended to be a streaming-only Amazon Prime Video type release. And I think it's on pace to make like $30 million this week. I totally agree with Tony that it's going to get frog stomped next week by Wicked and Gladiator. And my guess is it will be available to watch on Amazon
Before
Prime
Christmas.
by December 15th.
100.
Yeah.
I was telling Katie, like I went with Katie and again, we both enjoyed it. And I'm like, with the way movies come out these days, I'm like, this is a Christmas movie. They were smart. They released it mid-November. That gives them the 4 weeks they need that movies now tend to stay in theaters, if even that, but it will be out before Christmas to watch again. I would have thought this was made for theaters. The reason being that it was MGM and Amazon only recently bought MGM earlier this year or last year. So I was thinking this is an MGM movie made for theaters, and Amazon, because Amazon would usually just go straight to Prime or give it 3 days in theaters or whatever. And I feel like this is an MGM movie for theaters, and Amazon's like, okay, we got to honor the theater thing, but like it's going on Prime soon, right? Like there's
I think they wanted it when they bought MGM. I think they wanted to have their cornerstone, like this is our streaming giant, like this is what's going to have people to subscribe to Prime Video. I think MGM at least the insiders fought back about that, and probably $7, Dwayne's production company as well, about getting a theatrical release. But I understand why, because so much money went into it. At the end of the day, this is going to find a life on a streaming service, or it's not going to find a life at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if you intended this to be for streaming, anything it makes in theaters is just free money.
Yeah.
Well, the story I heard was that The Rock got the big $50 million paycheck because I guess at the time they were negotiating his contract, it was strictly going to be a streaming film because he wouldn't get any back into the box office.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, that's good for them then. So that makes sense. We were talking about how do you possibly get to 250, but with streaming movies, again, the stars negotiate those big paychecks because they're not getting back end from box office. So that makes sense why the budget's so inflated. If The Rock's getting 50 and Chris Evans gets 30 or 35 or whatever, and J.K. Simmons gets 20, or I mean, they're all making their money up front, which is going to pad out the budget, and they probably gave half of it to actors or something, right? And then they don't have the money left over for CG and all that.
Yeah.
And if you're watching it on streaming, the CG isn't as noticeable, right? Because when you're watching on a big, huge IMAX screen or whatever, and wasn't there the story that The Rock saw Oppenheimer and was like, I need this technology for Red One? It's like
PR swooped in so fast after that comment went viral.
Oh my gosh, so funny. But anyway, so when you're watching it in IMAX and it's like, oh wow, that's a really bad green screen sequence. But when you're watching it on your phone, I mean, you're not really going to notice too bad. So that makes more sense.
Sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess that's it for this one. We'll go around the table and people can say where to find them. Jim, where can they find you?
They can find me at wearemoviegeeks.com.
And Tony, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Mosello ATC, and Morning Blend St. Louis airs on KPLR 11 at 5:30 a.m. Saturday mornings.
Awesome. This is Kevin. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin R. Brackett.
And this is Tom. You can find me on Threads at Tom O'Keefe Jr. or on Facebook at facebook.com/Tom O'Keefe. You can find the show online at facebook.com/Real Spoilers. While you're there, like the page, join the group, and of course, don't forget our Patreon. So that's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, Joe and Patch are saved by the Super Duper Looper.
Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, 'cause we always